Wow, that's a long time coming. So welcome. Welcome to the Kassa podcast. This is the first such episode. And my name is Kassa Corley, and I've thought about Kassa for a long time just because all my life people have been saying mi Kassa, Kassa. My name's actually Ethiopian, but I've thought a lot over the years about what home means and what building means. And when you say mi Kassa, Kassa, it's like my house, your house. And I feel like in this economy, it's kind of hard to build houses and get home ownership and so on. But we're all building towards something. And so the vision with this is to really have dialogue with people that are moving towards something, that are essentially working on themselves mentally, spiritually, physically, have things in the mix that they care about or are deeply passionate about. And I want to have dialogue with those people that I find really interesting. And I'm really excited today because this is actually a person I've wanted to talk to for a really long time. And I'm excited to have you guys at home have the opportunity to talk to him or at least listen to him as well. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my man, a homie, really good dude, Zay Lewis.
What's going on?
So let me essentially give a little intro for Zay here. So Zay is a musician, rapper, producer, thought conveyor. What else? What else am I missing? He's also a model and someone that really lives intentionally. And I think that's something I really value about you in the short time, relatively short time. I think it's been about a year or so that I've known you. And welcome. Thanks for being here, man.
Yo, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's crazy because I think we are coming up on just a year of knowing each other. We met in Philadelphia around this time last year, and it's been awesome knowing you ever since. So I'm excited.
Super random because basically we have a mutual friend that was having a housewarming party in Philadelphia, and you happened to be essentially performing in front of a group of people for the most part you didn't really know.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is this dude? Like he was like performing, he was talking to us about his music and what it meant to him, but then he was the channel switching you were able to do in that space was pretty remarkable.
I appreciate that.
I feel like you gave a soliloquy about what your music meant to you, and then you pivoted really quickly into Coretta. And I was like, yo, this is awesome. And for folks at home, all right, this is my camera, right? Check out Coretta on Spotify, Zay Lewis, Coretta. You have a bunch of great tracks, but that one immediately resonated for me. And the way you performed that too in a live setting was like, I don't know if you remember, the audio was not ideal initially. Do you remember that?
I do, of course. It wasn't the first time that's happened at a performance, so I was kind of ready to roll with the punches on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just adjust basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's about energy, end of the day. That's something I had to realize over time is like, I'm a lyricist first. Like I got into making my own music because of artists like Lupe Fiasco, who are all about writing very intentional lyrics and having layers. And I still love that, but I've come to realize over time that a lot of it has to do with the energy. And the same is true of performances. Like things can go wrong, but if you bring that energy, it won't really matter.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's something that you can kind of really consider in a lot of aspects of life. Just bring the energy, bring that momentum. We were talking about that a little bit on the way here about how, sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't. But when you have it, to really just kind of build on that and kind of stay with that energy as long as it's there. So, but you got into a little bit about how you started, and that's a place I want to take us for a moment because, the talent that you have is not born overnight. So what was your start like? I did scour the internet and, got a sense that you'd been in a lot of places. You grew up in Missouri, but then your dad had a bunch of different jobs growing up. And so you were hopping around the Midwest essentially, but you had some roots in New York. And so you eventually made your way to New York long term. But tell me about that start and, rapping on the bus and all these things I saw on the internet.
Oh man. Yeah. So I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, and I lived there for like 5 years, give or take. And then we ended up moving to Ohio when I was 5, and I lived there for 3 years. And then after that, we moved to Illinois. So most of my upbringing was in the Midwest. That's pretty much like at the core of who I am. And when I first started making music, even to this day, I would argue like the Midwest sound in terms of Midwest R&B, Midwest hip hop, all of that stuff is really deeply, even like Midwest like emo and like alt rock, like all of those influences, regional influences are heavy in my music. So definitely a Midwest kid. But the New York connection is both my parents are from Brooklyn. So my dad grew up in Williamsburg. My mom grew up in Flatbush and Bed-Stuy. She moved when she was pretty young. So, you know, I've been coming to New York every year since I was basically one. Like, and this was always a place I figured I'd end up. And I always felt like I needed to, like there was some type of reconnection I needed to do, not just in a immaterial kind of like spiritual sense, but also just literally with family, being closer to cousins and aunties and uncles, because that's something I didn't really get growing up. So, yeah.
You're an only child, and this definitely also came up. You know, I was sleuthing the TikTok arena.
For sure, shout out to TikTok.
My man is prolific on TikTok. Like he makes really good content. You know what's crazy is that I don't have TikTok.
Congratulations.
No, I mean I might need to navigate over there eventually if this medium decides to expand and grow.
No, TikTok's amazing. I was joking, but at the same time,
but
it can be addictive.
I think one of the other things I wanted to add to the list of descriptors I wanted to give you was actually griot, and you don't give young people that moniker. For folks at home, like a griot is like essentially like a West African storyteller or poet and so on. And you have a really interesting way of weaving narrative into a lot of things you do, but especially I watched at least like 30 of your TikTok videos a few nights ago, and you do really great storytelling as far as discussing our history, stuff we're not taught about in school, things that you're thinking about. And like, how do you come about like doing that work and coming to that understanding that you ultimately are able to share with other people?
Yeah. I think there's like layers to that. I guess I could start like from in the spirit of storytelling, like anecdotally, like I remember going to church with my parents and like kind of zoning out and just looking at the carpet and like noticing all the dots. I use this analogy all the time, but like noticing all the dots in the carpet and realizing like I could use my imagination to see anything I wanted in the carpet. Like I could see a tiger, I could see like a bird, I could see a couch, whatever I want, because it's there. Like all the points that were making up the things I was seeing in my mind are there in the carpet. It's just, you know, the power of my consciousness and my imagination that's allowing me to connect the dots. And so I feel like that's kind of been a guiding philosophy for the way I think about everything. Is like everything is connected. You just got to find the way to connect the dots. And sometimes when you do that in an unconventional way, I guess you could say, it ends up revealing new things to you. Sometimes it doesn't really lead anywhere, but I think it's a really good exercise to apply throughout life. Is just like, how can I make these two things connected? Because everything is connected somehow. How many degrees of separation are between this topic and another topic? And how can I use one or the other to understand the other one? So
when you're talking about, you know, the slave trade, very, very interesting. Again, my camera right here. Zay has a very incredible monologue is unfair, but has a very, very interesting, informative video on the slave trade, and you know, actually multi-part series about how it developed, how awful it actually was, and just learning that history is not something you learn in American institutions, frankly. So just super insightful. You also have, you know, content on audio engineering and various things. And I guess the way you described the carpet just now, it got me wondering, like, it feels from when you're conveying this stuff that you have all the answers. Are you actually doing this is part of it you're actually asking questions when you do these things? Because if I feel like afterward, like, man, I really learned stuff I didn't know about the Haitian Revolution or about something that's really important. So you're like, so you're doing it partially to ask questions. Yeah, definitely. And like, that's not without risk. Like, I've definitely asked questions in public forums that were like either ill-phrased or like
agitated people, and you can get admonished for that. And that's something that I also like feel like I gained a lot of benefit from. Like the storytelling and like expressing my opinions has been really great for sharpening my viewpoint, but also like the moments where I ask questions and like the answer is not what I was expecting, or I get challenged on what I'm thinking. So it's by no means a situation where I'm like at least trying to be out here conveying that I know all the answers. And I get it wrong sometimes, and people let me know for sure.
They let you know. They're always gonna let you know on the internet, right?
Absolutely.
They always gonna let you know. That's for sure. Yeah. So just hopping back, because I started saying something about being an only child, and then I weaved somewhere else. That's gonna happen a bunch today. Do you think like that experience of like being an only child somehow made you closer with like your cousins and aunts and uncles and parents? Like, did you lean in more with them than especially as you were traveling a lot growing up, like being in the Midwest, being in various states? Like, what were your points of connection and intersections? We were talking about this before when you were coming up, because you had this thing about what you wish, what you think would be good advice for parents that might have one child, and like how they should perhaps navigate that. Yeah. And it was something I was thinking about, is how was that for you?
Yeah. I do want to say, like, I think of any video I've ever made, and really I feel like in the last years when I've mostly gained a platform on TikTok, that's the video I'm probably most proud of. Because like, I mean, it was just thousands of parents with only children who were like, I'm going to raise my child differently because of this video. And I know like a lot of the things that I said in that video were coming from personal experience. And so like, it's nice to think that maybe that's impacting someone else's childhood in a positive way, I hope. But yeah, being an only child was, I think, really formative to who I am, especially as a creative. Because I didn't grow up around my cousins, actually. Like most of my cousins and my aunts and uncles live here in New York, or I did at the time. Many of them have moved since, just because the city's getting so expensive and, life happens and stuff. But that being said, yeah, I felt really isolated a lot of my childhood. And I think moving around prevented me from having a ton of those long-term friendships that maybe people otherwise develop at that age. And so especially like between the beginning of my consciousness, like 4 and like 9 or so, like I feel like I spent a lot of time alone, and I think that made me more creative. I spent a lot of time imagining things, drawing, or like wandering. So yeah.
You weren't playing sports like on these teams, like,
Yeah, I probably should have done more team sports, but I really liked individual sports, and my parents kind of enabled that. So I did, like, I was mentioning, I did a lot of martial arts and stuff like that, which is, has an element of community, but there's also a strong element of individual practice in that. I probably would have benefited from being on more team sports, and I think that's probably something that's good for only children to get involved in, just to learn some of those social skills.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm like the greatest sibling, but
how many siblings do you have again?
I have a younger sister. I have one younger sister. But I will say that I think what the extent to which there's value in team sports coming up, it's that you kind of, there are two things that happen a lot. You get berated by your coaches, and so you just learn, for better for worse, to take real constructive criticism, and honestly, a lot of unconstructive criticism, but you just learn to take it.
Distinguish the difference too. Yeah,
and internalize it and kind of act or move on that, even if it's not great. And then I think the other thing you get is just a selflessness that only comes when like you gotta like total cliche like sacrifice for your teammate, because it does wind up happening where it's like, man, this dude isn't better than me. but he might be open on this play. Like I might need to give him the ball and have him take that open 20-foot jumper. They weren't about the corner threes and analytics back 20 years ago. So it was a lot of like, take the mid range, young blood. But yeah, those are the things. So what of those places you were in the Midwest before getting to New York would you consider home?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's funny, like, because when people ask where I'm from, my visceral reaction is usually Kansas City, because that's like objectively true. That's where I was born. But I'd say that Illinois was home for me. Like a lot of the most formative, at least for me, on a conscious level, the most formative years were like there. So middle school and high school. That's where I came into my own. That's where I started making music. And, you know, that's where I had the longest term friendships. And also like kind of started gaining some independence and like spending time on my own. And, you know, so I would say Illinois is home for me, I guess, in that sense. But it's not home in the sense that like I could go there right now and feel like I'm home. I actually don't have any place that I feel that way about. I think New York is the closest thing I have to that. But yeah.
All right, bet. Yeah. All right. So fast forward to New York then. Like you get here in 2021 or 22.
It's like, complicated.
It's complicated. All right, we have time.
All right, true. Yeah, I went to school in Massachusetts, and at this point I was pretty invested in the music thing, so I was coming down to New York frequently, like every couple of weekends, staying with aunties or staying with friends. And so like I would say I started coming down here consistently in 2018. But like I said, I've been coming to New York every year since I was born for Christmas and Thanksgiving. So, but that was me coming here as an individual as opposed to like part of a family unit.
Were these aunties that are like real aunties, or are these like the fake aunties? Because like I have a
They're
ton
all
of
real
like
aunties.
Okay, so you just have a lot of
you
have a lot of like auntie aunts. I have a lot of aunties that like I'm not related to. Like
no, I'm not related to them. I'm just saying they're like I just would never claim them as fake aunties. They're my real aunties. Okay, but I'm not blood related. To them.
All right, that's what I'm for the folks at home. Like you know, I have a ton of uncles. You know, a ton of. Like a lot. Like,
oh, this is your cousin. I've never met this man in my life. Yeah,
I have so many uncles. You know what I mean? So, I get the vibes. But yeah, they really. I feel like it's like black women, black men that like really like looking after us when we need it is like a huge part of the experience in America. Honestly, I don't know. That was just a little detour. I just wanted to kind of clarify that was people help you along the way. You have a tribe that's kind of building you up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like there's something seductive about like the Cinderella story one, and also like the self-made story, which I guess are kind of the same thing. But like, I've never met a man that was self-made ever. I've never met a person who was self-made. There's just no way. It's not possible. We're communal beings. We're communal species, and like, whatever I have accomplished and whatever I will accomplish has been a group effort. I could never claim as individual success.
Yeah. So you got here. There was a bit of a convoluted, complicated way you got here, and then the pandemic like was kind of around. I think I spent a lot of time, with having fun with your catalog, and I was trying to think of like a song like Fisherman's Dream, like you have fishing rods like outside of Fort Greene Park. Yeah. By the way, the song bumps. It's honestly, if I had to like, it's like a top 2 or 3 song for me. Wow. Of yours, like it's clever. Like like people always say there's a lot of fish in the sea, but no one ever talks about fishermen in that context. Yeah. Was that a you idea?
The hook was me, yeah, if I'm not mistaken. The production was me and Chris, who goes by Johnny Champagne. He's a keyboardist, so that keyboard solo you hear at the end, that's all him. But yeah, that was during a time, I want to say we recorded that before the pandemic, and maybe it came out around the pandemic or right after. But yeah, no, like that was one of those sessions where we just kind of made the bulk of the idea in one go. And we were making a lot of music at the time. We made a lot of songs together during that time.
It felt like there was an explosion for you during the pandemic. Like, and I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it felt like you started to foray into TikTok during the pandemic. You put out, you were working on, you put out music. Was that like a positive formative period for you? Because I feel like if I'm just being personal for a moment, like it was a hard period for a lot of people, but like it did in some ways change me forever. Just in terms of my demeanor physically and mentally and otherwise. And there was some rebuilding that needed to take place afterward, whenever afterward was. And I don't know, people definitely experienced it differently. Then you can look at people in, traditional economies and, maybe not blue collar economies, and they're like, the pandemic, that was a killing. There's like, I did great during the pandemic. That was because you really did see, inequities exacerbate during that time.
Absolutely.
What was it like as an artist?
Yeah. Yeah, it's also like, it's hard to put like bookends on the pandemic, I feel like, and figure out because people seem to disagree on, well, the beginning and the end in terms of like when it really started to feel that way for people. But for me, like the pandemic kind of started in early February of 2020, and right around my birthday, actually.
When was your birthday?
February 7th. Yeah, I'm an Aquarius.
All right, you had a solid 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Like you had like February, the late February was all right for you because it was like March. It was the first week of March, right?
It was already starting to get weird. Like
Really?
the masks, like I just on a whim was like, maybe I should get a mask from CVS. Like I want to say it was like January 29th. It was like very early.
In January?
Yeah, and there was no masks. And I was just like, oh, okay, well. But no, it was already starting to get weird.
Man, in January
You were chilling?
I was outside.
No, yeah, I was still outside, but I was just like, I was starting to get like, I couldn't tell if it was paranoia at that point, but I was starting to like feel like, all right, this could kind of get crazy.
Wow.
But in any event, like I would say the first half of that year was actually terrible for me musically. Well, I don't want to say terrible, but in terms of actually making songs, I felt really stagnant and kind of listless, at least from an artistic standpoint, but from a personal standpoint, there were highs and lows. I spent part of the pandemic with my auntie and uncle and granny in New Jersey. And then the person I was dating at the time lived in New York, and their roommate had left. And like at that point, it was kind of clear that we would potentially be locked down for a couple of weeks. I mean, we didn't have a sense of how long. So I went over there and ended up staying with her, and it ended up being like 3 months. We were kind of like locked in an apartment together. And yeah, during that time, like I quit music. I told myself I'm done with music during that time. I didn't like announce it or anything, but like I was just done with it. And I mean, this is mad personal, but I feel like music at that time in my life was also like creating unhealthy wedges in my like relationships, especially romantic relationships. And so I feel like the person I was dating was kind of relieved on some level. And I also like thought I felt relief, and I sat with it for a day, and I felt like I had no purpose. Like it was a really hard spot for me. And I had to like spend the years after that kind of questioning, like, is this a healthy dynamic where if I let go of this thing, I feel like listless. I feel like I don't have purpose. Do I want that kind of relationship with anything in my life? And so, yeah, nope. But after that second half of the year, I started making a lot more music. And I feel like I started kind of getting this snowball rolling that's still rolling to this day, really. Yeah.
How is music interfering with your other affairs? Like, what was it that was creating that before the listlessness? Say that 3 times. Listlessness. Before that, what was the music doing that was negative? Can you even verbalize it? Like, is it like a hard thing to verbalize?
It's not. It's like, it's not a hard thing to verbalize, but like what's connected to it and what's underneath it is just like so much bigger than the little string that you end up pulling on when you talk about it. It's like, I mean, at the core, like I think it's a cultural issue, like with America, period. Like, this is kind of euphemistic, but even just like hustle culture. Like I was just like hook, line, and sinker in this. I was just like, I gotta be like Kanye. Like I gotta do X, Y, and Z amount of beats per day. And like the only way I'm ever gonna get this to happen is if I work harder, which is, it's an element of it. And I think there's a season for that in every artist's trajectory and every artist's career. But like, I was kind of stuck in that place. And I also thought that was the answer. It's like, that's an element of the answer. And yeah, I was just burning myself out and kind of like almost indulging in like the neglect of everything else in my life. Like, oh, like there's something poetic or beautiful about like blocking everything else out and just working on music. And I think, that isn't a great way to maintain healthy relationships.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because if I can kind of empathize with that. as folks may not know, but I've been involved in chess for a very long time.
Heavily.
Kind of like how you've been involved in music. And one of the things that was becoming a bit of a problem, honestly, right before the pandemic, so kind of a similar time frame, was that the reason you sometimes fall in love with something or get into something is not the reason you stay, or at least it's not the reason that you sustain yourself in that craft. And for me, it was, I always felt like chess was part art, part sport, part science, but I loathed the science dynamic, and I still do. It's like too much math and science today. I liked it because of the art and the sport of it. And when you're, playing in a professional capacity, so much of it becomes results based. And when it becomes about the results, that joy, that kind of that unbridled joy, that passion, that ingenuity, that creativity is not the most important thing. It's about the results. And sometimes those can come in conflict in a really major way. So I'm kind of speculating in some ways, or grasping here, but I could see how it's like, oh, I got to make X amount of beats a day, or I got to, conjure this up to maybe fit a particular marketplace in some way. That's not necessarily conducive to, where you really want to be. Yeah.
If you even look at like my catalog, like right around Lightspeed, like when I dropped that song, like that was me in a bad place creatively, I feel like, in a way. Like people like that song. That was the first song I ever got placed in any type of film. Someone used it in a short documentary. But my head was in the wrong place. And part of the reason my music changed so much, I guess like a year or two ago, is because I was seeking to reconnect with the reasons I got into music in the first place. And it ended up changing my whole sound. So that's real. Yeah.
That's wild, because I was actually going to ask you about Lightspeed at some point, because I heard somewhere else that the inspiration was partially just taking the A train and seeing flickering lights with the A train, and then that eventually, and that sounds like a really positive, cool experience. But it also could have been, it was late, I was tired and weary, my eyes were flickering, and it could have been. It's amazing how you can flip it and it could not be that great. Yeah. So
it wasn't even necessarily that the inspiration was bad, or that my ability to take inspiration and make it into music wasn't like functioning. It was like the music I was making it into just didn't feel like an authentic expression of where I was at in the moment. Like it felt like I was trying to make a caricature of myself. And it's like performance is part of being a performer, right? That's like, there is like this kind of larger than life element. You do want to perform, but at the same time, like it's got to have a really sizable seed of authenticity, at least for the way I want to do things. And I feel like that song didn't really have that seed. Like I feel like it was like an A$AP Rocky song, like low key. I feel like it was just like trying to be something I'm not, and that's just not me,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. you said it. So all right.
That's just how I feel.
So what was the first song that kind of got you back after that moment? That got you back where you're like, this is where I want to be.
Coretta. Yeah. Because I set out on this I set a mission, and I actually just set a new mission for myself a couple weeks ago. The last one took me like 2.5 years. Like it was like 2022 till now, or 2021-ish till now. And it was just like, I just want to effectively channel emotions through my music. I want to channel emotions. And Coretta was like the product of months in the studio in Pirate Studios in Bushwick with Jalen. We would meet up like almost every week. I was working a job that paid pretty well at the time, so we would just meet in the studio every week, and I was just trying to connect with myself. And he suggested something. He's like, play me a bunch of music that you used to listen to when you were a kid. So I ended up playing him a bunch of like old songs that I used to listen to. We went all the way back. And I ended up playing gospel and reggae and like rock, and the first hip hop songs I got into, like, cause I ended up getting into hip hop relatively late, actually. Like there were certain hip hop songs my dad showed me and stuff like that. But a lot of the music I was listening to was like reggae, gospel, and like 70s R&B and even disco, like a lot of old school music. So anyway, I realized like that brought something out of me, and I realized like music was a way for me to connect with my inner child and also like kind of heal myself retroactively. And yeah, just I feel like I always felt the emotional power of music, but it like the way that music can actually, like making music can actually heal you, never really hit me until like fairly recently. And like that's kind of been the journey I've been on since. Yeah.
So some self-healing there.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it resonates with people more too, because before people would be like, I love your music, I love New Old Kanye, I love this. But, and I like here and there I'd have someone say like, oh, your music really impacted me, or like it helped me a lot. Like I had one kid say something pretty impactful. It was like, I really appreciate that. But since making those decisions, like that is now like kind of become the norm, where I hear people saying like, I use this music to help me get through this, or this music resonates with me in this way. And that's really affirming on my end.
Were you talking about someone in particular in Coretta, when you're like, baby, don't cry, you're my Coretta?
It's funny, that song was almost entirely freestyle. So that line came like straight out of my subconscious. Like if there's a Zzip available where like I have like, because starting in 2021, I started filming like every studio session I would go to, even just my day-to-day stuff. And I started cutting it into these documentaries that I put in zip files, and then people could buy the zip files. I'm about to bring that back with a new concept I'm working on. But
hold on, we need to just pause on that, because like you said that really low key, but that's actually something I wanted to talk about and kind of amplify. The man is changing the game, folks. Musically, he is looking for new ways to reach audiences, and it's brilliant. People recognize today that, you know, the music game, at least as far as, you know, from a commercial perspective for artists, a lot of artists are not being supported properly, and, you know, are making nothing off their streams and so on. And it's like, I mean, what you're doing to get to people that actually like your music is brilliant, because I think, I mean, part of the philosophy, right, is like, yeah, like 1 or 2 million listeners, monthly listeners, is like amazing and really hard. But you know, it's just as great and sustainable having 1,000 people that really mess with your music and are really like omnipresent. And if you can reach those people in various ways, you're good. So with that in mind, the Zzip, right? If, as I understand it, you can correct me, it's like, look, you know, give me your name, give me your email address, and when I drop some, and you know, obviously, contribute to the project. I think you were just like $10 or 10 or so dollars was a Zzip at the time.
Yeah, the price floor varies, but ultimately you can pay what you want above it.
Yeah, it's like, I've seen that model a bit, but like it's a steal for what you get. You're getting great music. You're getting a backstory as well at times. And you know, for that, you're supporting the artist, and there's a dialogue there that extends beyond that moment. And man, this is going to sound very corporate-y, but there's also lifetime value in that relationship, whereas because there's ownership. So right, like we don't own anything anymore. Like
exactly.
We're a rentier society. Whether it's, you know, the way we listen to music, you know, cars, houses, apartments, movies, people still like to own things, I feel like. And there's also value in having physical things too, and being in physical spaces like this. And I feel like I'm all over the place right now, but
no, you're
I'm philosophically aligned with where you are as far as that kind of thesis and us needing that more. So just, you know, I'm giving you your flowers, man. It's a genius. That. It's just genius, and it's sustainable, and it makes sense.
I appreciate that. Yeah, like actually, we were at your place earlier. That call I was taking, we're trying to make the Zips physical. And so that's kind of like the next step for us, bridging the gap between like that old school feeling of physically owning something while also still having easy access on your phone in a way that's not clunky, like a USB or, I mean, even a QR code, something super streamlined. So stay tuned because we're definitely going to bring the Zips back.
Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
man.
go. Okay. So yeah, that's just, it just makes a lot of sense. And I guess in that vein, because, you know, having this relationship with people and your people, and by people, your fans, your listeners, people that care about what you're up to, it would seem that there's almost like this tension because there's a bit of a disdain for these virtual spaces, this social media spaces. At the same time, it is probably the primary medium with which you engage with people now. And so it's like, how do you reconcile that contradiction?
Yeah. To some extent, I don't think you do. I might mispronounce the name, but there's this like, I guess you could call it a symbol, the Ouroboros, which is like the serpent swallowing its own tail. And I think, and this is maybe true at the most macro level too, I think like even just like late stage capitalism is probably the thing that's most likely to bring about the end of capitalism as we know it and, you know, evolve it to the next stage, which I think is something, this is maybe controversial to some, but I think is kind of an inevitability in as much as feudalism not lasting was an inevitability. And so, you know, to that end, like being in these digital spaces, this kind of golden era of social media, which is already kind of coming to an end and I think trying to transform into something new, but for various reasons is struggling, is the thing that's more than likely going to bring about its end. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, I'm on social media talking about like thinking of new ways to interact and like commune with each other and with art and all this stuff. But like, that's the way it happens.
Where do people go? Like, like this is I feel like the discourse, like, yeah, like all this other shit, is kind of whack. You know, I'm here. I kind of hate it here, or I don't love it here at least. But it's like, where else am I going to go? Do you have an idea of where you want to go?
Yeah, personally, I think I have like short-term ideas and mid-term ideas. Long-term, it gets fuzzy. And I think everything kind of gets fuzzy, which is kind of scary and exciting. I don't just mean like the entertainment landscape. I think like just the future in and of itself kind of gets fuzzy when you try to project too far in the future right now. But that being said, well, actually, without even addressing your question, one thing that I think about a lot and I talk about a lot is how there's kind of like a parallel between the concept of alienation and the place that we're in right now with social media. Like back in the day, like the MySpace era or even before that, there was some level of coding that your average internet surfer, quote unquote, would end up learning just as a result of being in these spaces, just to modify whatever platform they're on, because it was just so rough that like you could kind of tear back the paneling and mess with the wires. And the interfaces have become increasingly smoother as all of these platforms have become increasingly commodified, to the point where like there is no incentive for someone to learn a little bit of HTML while they're perusing on Instagram in the same way that there was even 10 years ago while on Tumblr, you know, where there was this incentive to like, oh, you can customize your page and learn how to create a space that's more fitted to the contours of what you're trying to do. And I think where that leaves us is the same place that it leaves us in the physical world, where it's like we don't know how anything around us works, and it kind of like leaves us immobilized and dependent. And so people are yearning for something new, but so few of us know how to even build those spaces digitally. I certainly don't. That's something that if I could go back in time, I might change, although I like to say I wouldn't change anything, but like I would probably like spend time learning how to code or whatever skills are necessary to kind of make my own digital spaces. And I'm still trying to do that now. I guess that's one exciting, actually, I don't even want to say that, but yeah. Yeah.
It's funny because I kind of want to respond. I think what you said a lot just now with respect to like having the agency to kind of just kind of realize some of the, and effectuate the change around some of the things you have issue with. And yeah, if the templates are close or approximate what your like workable systems, you start to lose that agency to do things yourself. So I totally hear that. You almost started to say something at the end, and I'm like, it kind of got me thinking about this question I had for you, because one thing that's always messed me up in life, like straight up, is whenever I say in like a really public spaces, I'm going to like, I have this ambition or I'm going to do something, or there's a timeline around it. It usually doesn't work out that way. And that's life in general. Like you make plans. I mean, some people say life is making plans and then you're gone, right? Like, but usually when I publicly convey my plans, then all types of stuff happens that's not the plan. And what is it like being, basically you are a public figure to various extents, just with the way you lead your life and your music and the way you exist on various platforms. And like, I guess what I'm asking is, are you comfortable publicly conveying your ambitions? Because, or do you prefer to kind of keep that under the vest? Because some people don't want you to succeed, like. So how are you with that?
I think I'm navigating it. I think the biggest concern when it comes to that is actually just myself. Like, I feel like when I tell people for instance, I did that to myself twice this week. I feel like two things happened that I was very excited about, the cover art included. And I told people, and I feel like somehow maybe this is just, you can chalk it up to superstition, but I feel like by telling people about it in my mind, it released the chemicals to say like, oh, you've done it, you've completed it. And then I just start fumbling every step of the process after that. So yeah, that's definitely something that I'm kind of wary of, is like, if I try to celebrate the win too early, quote unquote, sometimes I get in my own way after that and I stop running like the race is still going. And then beyond that, yeah, I mean, I definitely I didn't realize until very recently that like I actually do have some haters. So like, there are some people who actively wish malice, which is interesting. I
haven't heard anyone put it like that before ever.
Yeah.
I have people that actively wish malice. That's crazy.
I mean, that's what it is.
That is what it is. It's just a unique way of putting it. Actively wish malice.
Because sometimes people passively hate. They don't even know. Like, it's just like an internalized thing, and that's more of like something it always is personal. Like, people are always struggling with their personal stuff, and then it gets projected outwards, myself included. But I feel like there's a different level when someone's like actually like kind of preying on your downfall or something. But yeah.
So I guess the opposite of actively wishing malice upon you are people that are like kind of pouring into you.
Yeah.
Who are those?
I mean, so many. You're doing it right now. My mom texts me every day, pretty much, something encouraging. My dad, it's funny, like my dad and I, we don't talk super often, but the last time we talked for like 2 hours and 45 minutes. So a very different dynamic, but like, he also pours into me heavily. And my friends too. Like, I just have a lot of people in my life who encourage me. I'm very blessed.
Yeah. I mean, this doesn't even make sense anymore to add, but I'm going to ask it anyway, given what you said before about music kind of being a double-edged sword at times. I heard somewhere something about like some movie or something. Maybe it was Mo Better Blues or something.
I just watched that for the first time like a month ago. I'm so serious. Yeah.
Yo, that's a great movie.
I enjoyed it.
It's a great movie. It's for so many reasons. But early on, shout out to Denzel Washington too, and Spike Lee and Spike Lee's sisters, in that one. But early on in that movie, the first woman that he's kind of messing with says like, I think my mom told me not to mess with artists because they'll leave you kind of like heartbroken or sad or melancholy and so on. And like, sometimes sometimes that can be the nature of art, is to like go through a range of emotions and just to consider deeply and to be introspective. The question is, are you ever lonely?
Yeah, of course.
And like, how is that? What is working through that or processing that look like for you?
That's a really good question. I think I'm very used to being alone just because of the way I grew up, kind of like what we talked about earlier. And I actively choose to spend a lot of time alone, and sometimes it can be hard for me to recognize that I am becoming lonely. But when I do, yeah, I mean, I guess it's as simple as reaching out and like seeking connection, which I think is still something I'm working on getting better at. Yeah, but no, I definitely get lonely. I think more people get lonely than ever, really, just because of the way that we live is so individualistic now. At least out here.
Yeah. No, it's for sure. I do think that like artists in particular, whether it's music or painting or, I mean, I consider chess to be an art form.
Absolutely.
So I think when you're in these spaces and maybe like it's not going super smooth, or there's more of a tendency to be really to go inward than in maybe other crafts where you do go into an office or or dealing with people and like working in teams, and like a lot of the exercises and expeditions, odysseys you go on can be solo trips, at least for a time. And you documented that. Like you documented that a little bit. Your YouTube, you shared one of your sessions, and like you were like, I was doing this, and this, and there was some burnout, and there was like, let me get like 5 takes of this 16, and then there were a lot of pockets to those moments. Yeah, like there wasn't even a question there. It was just like it felt like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I also realized at some point, so I would say, I've been spending a lot of time alone, or I haven't been spending a lot of time alone. I've been hanging out with people, but I realized everyone I'm hanging out with, I'm making music with. So it's just like every interaction is collaboration, which is beautiful. It's one of my favorite types of interaction. But I realized I was doing so little socializing for the sake of socializing. It was actually ridiculous. Like if you excluded that, I wasn't seeing anyone for very long periods of time, which maybe isn't necessarily healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're meeting people, how do you introduce yourself?
I introduce myself as, it varies. Yeah, and it's always interesting. I feel like the second after I introduce myself, I catch myself and say, why did you introduce yourself that way? Because it's either Zay Lewis or Isaiah or Zay.
I even mean beyond the name, right? Like you do all these things. Like you obviously, like maybe you do some things more than others, but like, do you lead with like, I'm Zay, I'm a musician? Or do you say, I'm Zay, I'm a rapper? Or do you say, I'm Zay, I'm a creator? Or I'm Zay, I'm an artist? Like, how do you self-identify when you're meeting people for the first time?
Yeah, I usually try. I feel like depending on the context, I will either try to avoid saying what I do, or I'll just be like, I'm an artist. Yeah, I
do the same thing, honestly. Like as far as the avoiding, to me these days, especially like if you're in New York, I mean, I was telling you about this. I just got back from maybe one of the best trips in my life. Throughout August, I was just traveling a bunch, and one of the things you notice so quickly when you're in other countries is that the what do you do question does not come up as quickly. Like it's so noticeable where here, after you get someone's name, you ask here in New York and other places in the Americas as well, it's what do you do? And part of that, I think, is people don't know how to converse with each other. So it's like that's the natural point of the departure. The other point is truly there's a implicit value immediately ascribe to you based upon what you're up to. So,
For sure, yeah.
and people, and that the way you know is people remember that before they remember your name.
Yeah.
And I'm totally guilty of this, where it's like, oh yeah, that person
they do
this,
yeah.
but I forgot their name immediately. I hear if you say someone's name like after they introduce themselves, it's like, oh, nice to meet you, and then like you say their name again, that like it actually becomes more transfixed in your mind.
That makes sense.
But that's what it is here, I feel like. So sometimes I'm just like, I'm not here for that, or like, nice to meet you, but like, you know what
do you do? Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, but it's like, you don't want to be rude, right? You don't want to be kind of like,
Yeah, that is an interesting kind of dynamic. And I also find like, if, for instance, in my case, maybe it's different when you say like, oh yeah, like I'm a professional chess player, or I work in like the world of chess. Like there's some implied level of professionalism in that, I feel like. But when I say like, oh, I'm an artist, or oh, I make music, like the first thought is like, all right, like joke. And then like they oftentimes will ask more questions, and then they're like, oh, you kind of do this for real. And they'll oftentimes say something like that. And it's like, what does it mean? What does that mean? That's an interesting question, like.
Oh, I can answer that for you.
Please give it to me.
Like I can, in the superficial ways that people are thinking about, it's like, oh, like you have a following, like, oh, like you're I can find you, what I mean? Like I think that's implicitly what people are saying when they're like, you do it for real, even though you can do it for real and not be super visible in the ways people expect.
And there are people who are doing it and they're making like way more money than I am. And a lot of other people who have huge platforms, and, they have a small platform, a small devoted platform, and they've made the right connections and they're doing great. Following doesn't even matter anymore. We're in a post-following social media era when you really think about it, because we have these algorithmic timelines. It's not like you don't just see the people you follow. You get recommended new people every single day. So it's like every time you make a post, you're starting from zero as the creator. Like me with 100,000 followers versus someone with 500,000 followers or 500 followers on TikTok. When you post to the For You page, you both have a chance of getting 1 million views. It's like the following doesn't mean what it used to. Like there's recognizability. Someone might recognize you on the street, and that has utility and everything. But it's a weird situation where the only real winner is the platform. It's become a casino essentially.
I heard you say somewhere that like becoming better on the platforms that, we all know the names of, is really just becoming a better employee. And I was like, damn, that's not comforting. That's a bit perplexing, unfortunate. So to continue to like go against that grain is important.
Yeah.
So
I think so too.
So you have an EP that you've been working on. It's the first one in like 5 or 6 years, I think, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about sort of the inspiration there that you're drawing from, say from talking about the names of songs, stuff like that? What could people expect from, what's the sentiment that, or what are you conveying? Where are you going? What were you thinking about when you're making that music?
Yeah. The oldest song on the EP is like, I want to say 2 years old at this point. So like really all of this is music that I made after kind of making that decision and changing the direction I want to move in. And the theme kind of has revealed itself to me as it was being made, as opposed to like going in with a set intention. And I feel like one of the main themes has been like, the first lyrics of the project are, hell is a feeling, heaven's got a ceiling. So this idea of like heaven is in the middle between like the lowest experience and the highest experience. And when you fixate on like always trying to raise the ceiling and raise the floor, you end up with this really thin margin where you're just maxed out and you're trying to find joy, but it's like you've maxed out all your joy receptors, if you want to put it in really like simple terms. And I guess the message being like there's value in appreciating the little things and not constantly trying to inundate yourself with pleasures and highs, and also there's value in appreciating lows. I feel like that's a running theme of the project, even in relation to myself, like trying to achieve more, striving for more, and then realizing like I should appreciate this moment because it's giving me context and everything is what it is by contrast. I need all the data points to appreciate life as much as I can.
You're spitting. Like I was like thumbing through folks. I have a phone here. I was like trying to find something that I had written down like a while back, trying to figure like, yes, I'd heard something related to this somewhere on the internet. And you said somewhere like heaven is in the in-between.
Yeah.
And it's so crazy because one of my favorite albums of all time, my favorite artist of all time is Blue. And he had a legendary album in 2007 called Below the Heavens. And so you're like hitting that thesis like crazy. And I'm just like, oh my God, like this is why I'm a fan here, man. Like, cause it's just like, it's so important to appreciate that contrast. And you had this analogy about like, you know, longing for a cookie and like how like the value in the cookie is not in how great it tastes and whatever, but and partially in how long it's been since you've had it, and how that contrast it elevates the experience for ultimately. Sure. See, that's the thing about New York in general too. Like people are, you know, constantly like, like I want to move to Cali, get that good weather and everything. How can you truly know joy if you don't know pain? How can you know summer if you haven't had winter?
I thought you were about to say rain and start making lyrics.
I actually do like the rain separately because
I noticed your bag, by the way. No rain, no flowers. I feel like that's very on theme.
No rain, no flowers. Yeah, I got that when in the last month when I was traveling. And that just spoke to me immediately because I think the one thing about the rain that actually even Blue actually said something related to this. So I'll give him credit initially where he's like he's something about like get lost in the rain, wash the thoughts on your brain dry. And that's like a beautiful theme to me. But to me, the rain forces you to be present. It's very rare where you can't like have your phone out and kind of just be like meandering without looking. Yeah. When you're in the rain, like you just have to focus on that for a little while.
Yeah, that's real.
So,
yeah. It's that same philosophy that led me to do this campaign where I was looking at all the ads in New York where we're just like constantly flooded with advertising and it's all really high quality and everyone's trying to set the bar higher and higher and higher. I was just like, what if I just put the bar in hell? Like, and just like write in red Sharpie on a notebook piece of paper that's just torn out, like, do you like this artist? Then check out this song by Zay Lewis. And I just started putting them all over the subway. And I feel like it gained a lot of traction. I ended up on like New York Nico's page and stuff like that. But it's because it was it wasn't about the quality, it was about the contrast. It was different than everything else. Like everyone was trying to raise the ceiling. And it's like there's actually more space if you lower the floor sometimes, you know?
I've never thought about lowering the floor. Everyone always wants to raise the floor in anything you do. So it's like lowering the floor that's different.
Well, I mean, I know this is zooming out a lot, but that's like how we're in the situation we're in with everything. Like with the economy, with climate, everything's like everyone is buying into this ideology of exponential growth forever, which is like the most religious sentiment I've ever heard being spewed from like all of these secular mouths about like, oh, like exponential growth. That just sounds like some fairy tale. In what nature just goes forever? There's always decay. And I feel like we don't factor that into the way that we're living. We're always looking for the next high and it just doesn't make sense. And that's the reason we're depleting everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's talk your shit for a minute because we're talking that we're getting there and like we've like been dancing around the contours of society and what's going on and that definitely has resonated with me. Even when I was a kid, it was always like, why aren't we, or maybe a teenager, was like, you always hear about growth, and like even within the context of companies, and it's like, yeah, you have to experience year over year growth, this, that, and it's like, why can't we just enjoy and be content with where we are? And we don't do that enough, like with whether it's bottom lines or just in our personal lives and so on. So there's definitely like a huge point there about, you know, just being satisfied, just feeling full. We're not really full very often. So,
and it's not an absolute answer. Like, I'm not saying like this is, if anything, I think the whole point is like to kind of steer away from absolutes. It's just like more sliders on the mixing board to like dial in further to get exactly what we're going for. And it's a moving target. Like when you're keeping your balance, you're never, very rarely, if you tell someone to stand on one foot, are they going to be perfectly still. It's constant adjustments and motion. Like balance is actually an action. It's motion. It's not stillness, in my opinion. The reality of it more often than not. And so with that in mind, it's like, you know, if I'm offering my perspective on how I think the balance needs to be struck more effectively, that's not the absolute, because if you take it to the absolute, you're going to fall over. If you take it the other way, you're going to fall over. It's just constant adjustment.
Balance is an action. There's a balance. I want that clarified again. Balance is not stillness.
Yeah, balance more often than not is not stillness. That's not to say it can't be. See, this is why I annoy people, because it's like there's no absolutes except for when there are absolutes, which is why there's no absolutes, which seems like a useless thing to say, but it's useful to remember that when you're having arguments or talking about anything, because it's like, all right, my perspective like has utility, but like, what is the context? Their perspective probably has utility, but what's the context, you know?
That's going to take a while to process, folks. That's not, I'm nodding my head, I'm like, yeah, but I have to think about that a little bit. So, fair enough. I don't know if I said this in the, in my little intro soliloquy about the man here, Zay Lewis, but, you are, I would consider like an activist. You're someone that's, you know, fairly outspoken about really critical societal issues. We were kind of dancing around societal themes and things being out of whack. And I mean, so the third or fourth time we met up, like it was total serendipity, because we were both at a protest against the war. One of my favorite comedians calls it Zzip, which is like Israel Palestine. It's not sexy conversation, but somehow that always kind of adds some levity to an awful situation. Sometimes it invites people in without feeling kind of like, you know, upset right away. But regardless of where your positions are and so on, and I know where you're at on some of this stuff, because we ran into each other at a rally in Brooklyn near Prospect Park, so you can guess. But how did you? I mean, you basically started a campaign on socials around a woman that was pregnant and was set to give birth in Gaza, which is obviously a hellscape.
She just gave birth, by the way.
And she did give birth, yeah. How did you come about that story, and like what compels you to action? Because, I mean, frankly, there is just so much, so many things that are out of balance, out of whack here, and you know, you really do get what's the word? You get. There's a real sense of apathy, particularly in America, in New York, in the space we're in, because we see suffering all the time.
Yeah.
And so what made you, like, I'm curious what makes you different. What makes you decide, okay, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to try and have an impact here. I'm going to try to use my platform to do something positive, because everyone can kind of do something, but like, I'm not out here always putting my money or my actions behind it.
Yeah. I don't know if this completely answers your question, but like one of the hard things about this campaign for me has been, Which again, like, it's only because of the context that I'm even like talking about me in this situation. But like for instance, like one time I posted about Gigi and her husband, and someone was like, shit, I need money too. And I was just like I know they were like trolling, but like that's also super real. And like I pass people on the street every day who need money, and sometimes I don't have cash, like, you know, or even like people that I know personally who could use help. I could use help, you know what I mean? Like there are things that I want to do that I don't have the funds for right now. It's just like, maybe this isn't the right answer necessarily, but like I feel like empathy and all those things are like they're muscles in as much as anything else is. And like if you don't use it, it will atrophy. And kind of like the apathy and atrophy are really close to each other, funnily enough. Like the words just kind of have the same energy and phonetically are very similar.
Bars.
Yeah. No,
that's a bar.
It's the same thing. It's
apathy
like,
and atrophy are kind of opposites.
Interesting. You think they're opposites?
Or not opposites. They're they're closer than not opposites. Maybe they're related.
But let's explore that. Like, because I could see that too. Like atrophy is kind of like a withering, and apathy kind of grows. Maybe.
We gotta workshop this a little bit more. But there's something there. They sound so similar that there's something there.
Yeah, I might be wrong on that. Maybe I'm entropy. Anyway, but the point is, like, it needs to be exercised, and I feel like that's something that I've tried to incorporate into my life. Like, I realized to an extent, like, it was actually an indicator of some personal issues that I have, like, where I like don't, like, in the same way that like sometimes discipline can be taken too far. Like, it's like, are you disciplining yourself, or are you punishing yourself because you feel like you deserve to be punished? Like, are you giving because you want to be generous, or are you giving because you feel like you don't deserve what you have? And finding that balance has been like a journey, I feel like. But all that to say, like, I think it's important to find ways to give. And so like, this is just one way that I've chosen to give, and it happens to be kind of public, but like I try to exercise generosity as much as I can.
It's funny because, I mean, everyone has this, everyone is hyperbole, but most people have the opportunity to make a serious impact in like, even in like a giving way on other people's lives. And they have a little bit more than they need. It might be a lot of it, it might be a little bit, but they have more than they need. But exercising that muscle is so rare. It's just not, for most people it has atrophied. And yeah, there's a, I think it's just not something that's common. It's really not common. And then also, you know, within the context of really, you know, tricky, publicly controversial issues and so on, there's almost less incentive to be public about it. Yeah. So because there's a cost to doing business and being public about things. And it's a cost that I almost certainly have not been willing to bear for a long time. Like, even to kind of step outside and kind of speak up about issues sometimes. Like, I mean, you met my friend Luca there. And he pushed me to get out there, because that's a really typical, really dumbass perspective or excuse I've had is like, my existence as a black man is a form of protest. It's just bullshit to kind of justify not sometimes the inaction, but putting your I mean, not even your money where your mouth is, but just actions where your mouth is like a huge thing. So we appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
So all right, I actually had a bunch of rapid fire questions for you. Okay. I don't know these off the top of my head. I'm going to look down at my phone for these. So
how are we doing on time, by the way?
We're hour 10.
All right, so we're like this. Yeah. This will like probably be like kind of that, and then we'll move.
I'm chilling
towards a wrap here. I'm gonna get into my rapid fire questions,
and
you're gonna.
I'm ready.
You can answer in more than like 5 seconds. These are just something I'd love to get a bunch of these questions going, and then you just see where you go with them. So,
Okay.
All right. So the rapid fire segment presented by, we don't have a sponsor yet, but we will eventually. We'll see where it goes. All right. So Zay, rapid fire, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What is something you wish you knew 10 years ago?
Okay. 10 years ago. I wish I knew that movies weren't supposed to be fuzzy when you see them in the theater. I thought it was like a quality of projection on film. And then I realized I needed glasses.
Oh, shit. Do you have contacts?
No, I don't have contacts. I'm just raw dogging life right now.
I don't think I've ever seen you wear glasses.
Yeah, no, I need glasses.
That's why earlier today, we were in like a Shakes smoothie shop. And my man was like, and I was ordering some. So I was like, this smoothies are really good. The P4. He's like, where's the numbers and the letters? I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's literally like right next to you. I was like, it's like, oh, there's a number there too. I was like, what's going on? The man needs glasses. I can confirm.
I do need
he
glasses.
needs glasses. Yeah. Or do you feel like you'd be a glasses man or a contacts man?
I can't do contacts, but I'm also not ready for glasses, so I'm just here.
Oh, he's just gonna be suffering.
Yeah. It's, you know what though? I get by, but yeah, it's a silly thing.
I think glasses would be, if I come to that point where they're necessary for me, as they probably will happen. I would definitely go glasses. I feel like putting a contact in your eye would take getting used to.
Yeah, I'm not ready for.
And then
all
you
that.
got to take it out when you go to sleep and all this. So, all right, so that's a good one. The man is blind. That's what he's telling you. Okay, all right. Next, if the party starts at 10 p.m., what time are you showing up?
To work the next day?
No, to the party. So
I'm not going to the party.
He's not going. He's not going. He's staying his ass home.
That's like half a joke because like that's just what I've been doing. But I was hanging out with like Kira, for instance, and I'm starting to go out more and recognize the value in that. Like, yeah, not going out isn't cool. Like, certainly bragging about not going out isn't cool. I'm trying to be more social. So I don't know.
It must be said on the way, and again, this is my camera. On the way to get here, we went through Barclays. We took the Long Island Railroad, and he ran into like 3 or 4 people in the street. So like this. He when he's outside, things happen when you're outside, clearly. So, yeah. All right. Besides where you currently live, and I kind of asked you this earlier, but you could still, maybe it would be a slightly different answer. Besides where you currently live, what's the next place in the world that feels most like home for you?
It's a hard question. I guess it would be Illinois, but it's like my parents don't live there anymore. I have no other family there. A lot of my friends have moved from there, so I guess where my parents live, but I haven't really lived with them since then. So I don't know.
So New York, Brooklyn is current, and if no other place you like run toward like with the same enthusiasm right now.
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've never really been attached to places, to be honest.
Okay. For me, by the way, just for me, it's like New York or Copenhagen, right? Copenhagen would be second for me.
Cool.
If you have some wait time at the airport, who are the first people you'd think about calling?
It's just something I would never do.
You wouldn't. So if you get to you're at the airport, it's like 2 hours before your flight. What are you doing then?
Social media or a book or meditate or getting food or anything, but I just would never think to call someone, to be honest.
Wow.
Which is maybe something I should work on.
To me, I know planes are super safe, much safer than driving and so on, but there still feels like a fatalistic element because it feels like you have less control on the plane. Like there's 2 people on the plane I always find it peculiar that there are 2 people on the flight, 2 people in the vehicle that know how to operate it. Like the ratio is crazy, like any other, like you're on a bus, there are more people than that. Like right. On the plane, it's like, man, 2 for 300. Damn, like the ratio is really bad.
That is crazy.
So it feels like, I just have some conversations before you kind of like give yourself up to something you have no control over just always felt right to me.
Yeah.
So I feel you. I feel you on your perspective. That with the reading, this was not on my list of questions, but who, like, I've saw it a few times even in your socials when you're giving these super eloquent history lessons. Who are you reading? Where are you learning this stuff?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a lot of the things that I'm talking about in those videos, those are books that I read years ago, and I've had to actually revisit in some cases to like update or refresh my memory. But right now I'm reading a lot of stuff that has to do with the environment. I don't know. I don't have full clarity on like how I want to talk about those issues, but I want to talk about environmentalism a lot more. So my auntie just gave me this book called Ages for Hope, which sounds like a kid's book, but it's actually like a really well fleshed out book about optimism when it comes to, just protecting the environment and people.
Are there any authors from some of the previous works you've read that are on the tip of your tongue?
Yeah, I mean, like this is the one that I recommend to everyone who wanted to know about the Haitian Revolution, but also some of the other topics. C.L.R. James, who's like one of the early kind of like, I don't want to say early, but one of the first like Caribbean thinkers to get like a lot of notoriety on the global stage. He wrote The Black Jacobins, which is like a really detailed history of the Haitian Revolution. And it ends up touching on a lot of topics related not only to the slave trade, but just the Americas in general. Fun books, not lighter topics for the most part, but The Botany of Desire by, what is that guy's name? Michael Pollan. He's written a couple books that are really fun. He's just a fun writer. He did a bunch of shrooms and he has like a bunch of cool perspectives. I don't know. I mess with him.
All right.
Yeah, tons of people.
All right, so we got a few. We got C.L.R. Lewis and
C.L.R. James.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
C.L.R. James. Yeah. LeBron James. And Pollan.
Yeah.
Cool. What's the best constructive criticism you've received?
Oh man.
Maybe these aren't rapid fire questions.
Yeah,
to be honest.
That's a heavy question.
My bad.
I think it's not maybe it's not the best, but like one that I've been thinking about a lot, especially because I've been speaking on TikTok and stuff like that, is like just tone advice and stuff like that. Because like I feel like the way that I can come across sometimes, it can be aloof or like it can come off a certain type of way, especially when I'm talking about like dense information stuff. And so learning to navigate that, because that's very rarely, if ever, my intention. So, like figuring out how to just be chill.
Yeah, I'm reminded of this from time to time. It's not your intention always. It's how it was received. And
that's real.
Yeah, and tone is a huge part of that. Man, sometimes. Yeah, just can, especially I'm talking to some people in my family. Sometimes it's important to kind of like, when you have history that's a bit mixed, it's important to to watch your tone, because it, when there are biases based on history and so on, that makes all the difference in how it's received, even if it was, regardless of what the intent was. So
my mom always says people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, which I think is very true.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to write that down. I'm gonna
she's got quotes for days.
Edit this
Shout
or
out to
take a
Mama
look at this
Lewis.
later. That's one that's gonna go in my. I have a in my notes. I have something that's just quotes.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
They're like, so a lot of it is like bars and like music and stuff like that. But sometimes that's going in there. Cool. All right, two more. You're in your neighborhood and you're hungry. What are you going to try to eat?
Goat roti from Ali's, with tamarind and pepper, or what's the other one? Is
this the one on Fulton?
No, this is on Flatbush. I know that one though. That one's pretty good.
Is that one called Ali's too?
There's a lot of Ali's.
Yeah. So Ali's is a common.
If you go to Trinidad, there's gonna be a lot of dudes named Ali, I feel like. Okay. But yeah, the one on Flatbush, or
I went with you to the ice cream shop.
To Scoops.
Scoops.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the vegan ice cream shop.
We didn't have any ice cream there. They have great
The lentil patties, I think we got.
I
right?
call it ITAL food.
Word.
It's
for sure.
like ITAL food for folks that it's really ITAL to me is like vitality. That's like kind of like the patois version of that's kind of what ITAL food is to me. So it's healthy. It's healthy. It's good and it's healthy. It's good for you. You know?
You don't leave feeling heavy.
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, it's either that or I want to answer this because I love food so much. I'm gonna say. Yeah, I might have to leave it at that. I can't think of something else.
All right, you gave us two. You gave us Ali's on Flatbush,
and you gave us Scoops.
And Scoop. So we got a 2 for there.
Cool.
All right, and last, so we are in 2024. It's we got a few months left, but define 2024 for you in 3 words or less.
Growth, resilience, and I don't know, TikTok.
He kept it a
for
buck.
Better, for worse, to be honest.
Resilience, and TikTok. You kept it a buck. All right, and that's the right way to finish. That's the right way to finish.
Let's cut it there, then.
Yo,
cool.
Zay, it was a pleasure.
Always, man.
I'm so grateful that this was the first. You're the first person I spoke to.
First of many.
Folks don't know, by the way, just a little backstory, that I had this intention. I do New Year's resolutions, and one of them was like start Kassa, like have this platform where I have conversations with people. And I called you in January, like the first week. I was like, hey, Zay, I have this idea. I want to run with it. I think you'd be a great person to talk to. And you were like, and I was like, can I borrow some of your time to do that? And you were super positive. You're like, yeah, like I'll do it and so on. But you know something? I think you should do it in person. And that threw me for a while because I have mics at home. I have a little bit of a setup. But I was like, man, like in person, like I don't know if I want to do it in my apartment. And then it took 9 months to actually
it's your baby.
manifest and find a place to do that. And so I'm blaming it partially on Zay here for saying I want to do it in person, but this actually feels right. So
I think so too. Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And sometimes plans are like that. It's like a dream deferred, like a raisin in the sun, you know? So, yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Much success to you as you continue to walk this path.
Yeah. And check him out. Obviously on the socials, check him out on Spotify. Check out a Zay Zzip. Get yourself a Zay Zzip. And, you'll Zay Lewis, if you look him up on anywhere, you'll find the man. So
cool.
All right. Over and out. Peace.